I thought I was safe keeping my truth quiet. But the moment I met Tyler's dad, confident, kind, and nothing like I expected, something inside me cracked open. I never planned to fall, especially not for the one person I could never have, and definitely not when the secret we shared could shatter everything. I heard the front door slam just as I stepped out of the shower. At first, I thought it was Tyler, my roommate, coming back early from his morning run. I wrapped a towel around my waist, still dripping, and padded into the hallway, humming under my breath. But it wasn't Tyler standing in the kitchen. It was a man I'd never seen before. Broad-shouldered, salt in his dark hair, holding a coffee mug like he belonged there. He turned as I froze in place. "Morning," he said casually, like I wasn't half naked and soaking wet in front of a complete stranger. I fumbled with the towel. "Sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." He raised an eyebrow, not unkindly. "You must be Alex." My heart stumbled. "Yeah, and you are?" He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Jack, Tyler's dad." I didn't shake it. My fingers were still dripping. "Right. Tyler mentioned something." He smiled like I was amusing. "Don't worry. I've seen worse first impressions." I mumbled something and backed toward my room, ears burning, heart racing, not just from embarrassment. There was something about his presence that filled the space too quickly, too easily, like he had his own gravity, and I'd already leaned too close. I shut the door behind me harder than I meant to. Tyler hadn't said his dad was staying the weekend. He'd texted something vague about my old man crashing with us for a few days, but that hadn't prepared me for him. I had pictured a briefcase, glasses, some polite smile over cold coffee. Not whatever that was. I got dressed quickly, trying to reset my brain, but it didn't work. The image of him lingered. Later that afternoon, Tyler burst in, all energy and motion like usual, and slapped my shoulder. "You meet him yet?" I didn't look up from my laptop. "Yeah, just barely." He dropped onto the couch. "Don't let him weird you out. He's chill, divorced, lives upstate now, works from home most of the time. I told him to stay here instead of wasting money on a hotel." I nodded. "Makes sense." "You okay?" Tyler asked, finally noticing the tension in my voice. "Yeah, just caught off guard." He grinned. "You always are." The rest of the day passed in strange, uneven beats. Jack didn't try to dominate the space, but somehow he filled it anyway. When he laughed, it wasn't loud, but people listened. When he asked questions, he waited for real answers. I found myself responding more than I meant to, watching his reactions, trying not to wonder what he thought of mine. That night, Tyler fell asleep early, headphones in, some crime doc playing on his laptop. I stayed up, pretending to read. Jack came out of the guest room around 11, barefoot, hair slightly messy. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "You're a quiet one," he said. I shrugged. "Tyler makes up for it." He smiled faintly. "I like quiet. It usually means someone's paying attention." I wasn't sure what to say. The silence wasn't awkward, just aware. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, nodding toward the living room chair. "Sure," I said, even though my chest tightened. He sat, sipped his water, and looked at me. Not with judgment, just curiosity. "What are you studying?" "Graphic design, some illustration stuff." He nodded. "That explains the sketchbook on the table." I froze. "You looked through it?" "Just the top page," he said calmly. "It was good. Raw." I looked down. "They're not finished." "The good ones never are." There was something in the way he said it that made my stomach twist. I couldn't sleep. His voice echoed in my head, low and steady. Not flirting, not obvious. But it stayed, like something had been offered and not named. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just intensity mistaken for interest. But I couldn't shake the way he looked at me when I spoke. Like I was someone worth listening to. And that was dangerous. Because I hadn't told Tyler I liked guys. Not because I was ashamed, but because it never felt necessary. Until now. Until his dad walked through our front door like a storm I didn't see coming. Tyler left early the next morning. Something about a group project and coffee that couldn't wait. Jack and I were alone again. I tried to stay in my room, headphones on, pretending to work. But I couldn't focus. Not with the smell of coffee drifting down the hall. Not with his voice, low and calm, humming along with some song I didn't recognize. Eventually, I gave in. When I walked into the kitchen, he looked up and smiled like he'd been waiting. "I made enough for two," he said, sliding a mug across the counter. I nodded, sat down. My fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic out of habit more than want. We sipped in silence for a few minutes, but it wasn't empty. It was charged. Then he said, "Tyler tells me you're not much for parties." "Not really," I said. "Too loud. Too many people pretending to like each other." He gave a quiet laugh. "Fair." Another pause, then, "You always this guarded?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He tilted his head slightly. "You think before you speak, like every sentence is being weighed." I looked down. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said gently. "Just means you've had reasons to be careful." The room went still. I wanted to change the subject, to say something safe. But what came out instead was, "I came out when I was 16, only to my mom. She cried, said she still loved me, but it was different after." Jack didn't flinch. "I didn't tell Tyler because—" I stopped. "Honestly, I don't think he'd care. But I do. I don't want to be the guy people tolerate. I want to be understood." He didn't respond right away. Then he leaned forward slightly, arms resting on the table. "I think a lot of people spend their whole lives pretending they're okay with being tolerated," he said. "It's a quiet kind of death." My throat tightened. "You're not alone in that feeling, Alex." The way he said my name, it landed like something solid, like I could lean on it if I needed to. I stood abruptly. "I should shower." He didn't stop me. That night, Tyler invited me to go out with him and some friends. I said no. I needed air, not noise. He shrugged, threw on a jacket, and left with a grin. "Don't let Dad bore you to death." The apartment was quiet again. Too quiet. I sat on the couch with my sketchbook, letting my pencil wander. Abstract shapes, half faces, no plan. Jack appeared eventually. Not with words, just presence. He stood near the window, watching the city shift in the dark. "Do you ever feel like you missed your own life?" he asked, not looking at me. I glanced up. "Sometimes. Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I followed the rules. Got married young. Worked. Paid bills. Built what I thought was the right kind of life. But lately, I've started wondering, how much of it was mine, really?" I set the sketchbook aside. "I've had thoughts," he said. "Ones I didn't have room for before. Thoughts about connection, attraction, about how maybe things aren't as clear-cut as I pretended." My chest went still. "I'm not asking for anything," he added, "but I needed to say that. To someone." I nodded. "I hear you." He finally turned to face me. His eyes didn't search. They settled, and something in me cracked open, quietly. It was later, much later, when it happened. I was brushing my teeth when I felt him behind me. Not close, just there. "Can I ask you something?" he said softly. I rinsed and turned. "Sure. If you could be seen the way you want, fully, honestly, what would that look like?" The question hit something I didn't know I was holding. "Someone who listens," I said, "who doesn't need me to explain everything, who doesn't treat my quiet like a fault." He nodded once, slowly. Then he reached out just for a second and touched my shoulder. Nothing suggestive, just a connection. "I see you, Alex." And then he was gone, down the hall, door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a long time, toothbrush still in hand, heart hammering in my chest. Because I believed him, and that terrified me more than anything. Tyler didn't notice anything, at first. Jack and I kept our distance during the day. But silence has a way of changing shape. It's one thing when nothing's been said. It's another when everything has, without a single word spoken aloud. The morning after the hallway moment, Jack was gone before I woke. Tyler was frying something in a pan, humming off key. I tried to act normal, but I could feel it, like static under the skin. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Didn't sleep much." He shrugged. "Too much caffeine?" "Sure. Let's blame the coffee." That night, Jack stayed in his room. I stayed in mine. But around midnight, I stepped out to grab water. And there he was, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up when he heard me. I was hoping you'd come out. I froze. He stood slowly. Don't worry, I'm not crossing a line. I didn't move, but my voice cracked anyway. Maybe we already did. He didn't argue, just said, maybe. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't comforting. It was full of things we couldn't say. You should get some sleep, I said, reaching for the faucet. He nodded but didn't leave. Alex, I turned. I haven't felt like this in a long time. Not because of you, just in general. I waited. I don't know what it means, but I know it's real. My hands tightened around the glass. Before I could speak, we both heard it. The unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. Tyler. He walked in with his usual clatter. Keys, backpack, a half laugh at something on his phone. He didn't notice the tension at first. Then his eyes flicked between us. You guys good? He asked, half amused. Jack cleared his throat. Just talking. Cool. Tyler yawned. I'm dead. Gonna crash. He walked past us, didn't look back. But something had changed. I felt it. I think Jack did too. The next day, everything was off. Tyler wasn't loud like usual. He didn't crack jokes or hum during breakfast. He just sat, scrolling his phone, barely speaking. I tried to act like nothing was wrong, but he kept glancing at me, like he was waiting for me to slip up. Jack left for a meeting around noon. I stayed behind, pretending to study, and then Tyler spoke. Hey, can I ask you something? I looked up. Sure. He didn't look at me when he said it. Is something going on between you and my dad? The words hit like a slap. No build-up, just impact. What? I asked, too fast. He finally met my eyes. I'm not stupid, Alex. I've seen the way you look at him. And last night, you were both acting weird. I opened my mouth, closed it. Tyler stood up. So? I tried to find the words, but they scattered the second I reached for them. We've talked. That's it. Talked, he repeated, voice flat. About what? Art? Life? My dad's midlife crisis? That's not fair. He stepped closer. You knew I looked up to you, right? Trusted you? I didn't do anything. You didn't have to, he said sharply. You let it happen. You let something happen. I stood. You're angry, I get it, but I haven't crossed any lines. Maybe not yet, he snapped, but you wanted to. That landed harder than anything else. Is that what you really think of me? He didn't answer. I turned to leave the room, but he stopped me with one more blow. You could have told me. You could have just been honest. And then he added quietly, you knew I'd take it the wrong way, didn't you? That's why you kept it quiet. That part was true, and it hurt more because it was. Jack came back to a storm. Tyler didn't speak to him, didn't even look at him, just left for the gym with his headphones in and the door slamming behind him. Jack found me sitting on the couch, still trying to slow my breathing. He knows, I said. He sat down slowly. What did you tell him? Nothing that mattered. Jack leaned forward. Do you want me to talk to him? I shook my head. Not yet. He looked away. This is why I said I didn't know what this was. I didn't want to break something I couldn't fix. My voice cracked. You didn't break it. I did. No, he said firmly. We both made choices. I stood. Yeah, and now we both have to live with them. Tyler didn't speak to me for the next 2 days. Not a word, not a glance. Just silence that felt louder than shouting. Jack tried. He knocked on Tyler's door, waited in the hallway, offered to explain. But the door stayed shut. The message was clear. By Sunday morning, Jack packed his things. I watched him from the hallway, heart heavy. He zipped up his bag like he was closing a door we hadn't even had the chance to open. I'm sorry, he said, voice quiet. I shouldn't have stayed. I shook my head. It wasn't just you. He stepped closer. If I made things worse for you, I need you to know. I never meant to. You didn't, I said. You just made me feel something, and I wasn't ready for the cost. Jack hesitated. Take care of yourself, Alex. He left before I could say anything else. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt different, not empty, just colder. That evening, Tyler came out of his room, backpack over his shoulder. I think you should find somewhere else to stay. I blinked. What? I can't live with you. Not after that. I stood frozen. Tyler, please. I didn't lie to you. I didn't plan any of this. He looked exhausted. You didn't have to plan it. You let it happen. You let him look at you like that, and you looked back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab his shoulders and say, this wasn't about you, but I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't matter. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. I don't know, but I need space. That was it. No anger, just detachment. And somehow that hurt more. I crashed at a classmate's place for a few days. A guy named Miles who barely knew me, but offered his couch without asking questions. People at school noticed I was off. A few asked. I shrugged, said I was dealing with roommate drama. They didn't need the details, but rumors have a way of leaking out. I heard whispers, something about Tyler's dad, about lines crossed, nothing direct, but enough. A friend I used to eat lunch with stopped replying to texts. A girl I'd partnered with for a group project suddenly asked to switch. It wasn't loud rejection, it was quiet distance, the kind that seeps in slow and stays. One night I sat on the floor with my laptop, sketchbook open beside me, and stared at a blank document. Then I started typing. Not for school, not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote about silence, about watching someone walk into your life and rearrange something you didn't even know was fragile. I wrote about looking in the mirror and finally seeing your own face without flinching. I wrote about Jack, not his name, not the details, just the feeling. What it means when someone sees you, not as a type or a label or a disappointment, but as a full person. Days passed. I found a cheap room to rent with two strangers across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked nights at a bookstore, drew in the mornings, answered emails from no one. Then one day I opened my inbox and saw a message with no subject line. Just one sentence. You still writing? It was from Jack. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I reopened that document, reread everything I'd poured out, and realized I wasn't ashamed of it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. I didn't answer Jack's message, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to be sure that if I did, it wouldn't be from the version of me that used to wait for permission. Instead, I published the piece. I took out the names, sharpened the honesty, and posted it on a quiet blog I hadn't touched since high school. I didn't think anyone would see it, but someone did. Within days, the post started spreading. Reblogs, shares, quiet comments from strangers. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying it out loud. This made me feel less invisible. People didn't care who it was about. They cared that it was real. A week later, I got an email from a queer youth group asking if I'd speak at a campus event. Not as an expert, just as someone who'd been through the fire and made it to the other side. I said yes before I could overthink it. The night of the event, I stood in front of 20 folding chairs and a handful of nervous faces. I read a part of my essay. My voice shook, but I didn't hide. Afterward, a boy who couldn't have been more than 16 pulled me aside. My dad said if I ever came out, I'd lose everything. He said, eyes glossy. I haven't told anyone until now. I didn't know what to say, so I hugged him. That moment mattered more than anything I thought I'd lost. Tyler showed up 2 weeks later. I was walking out of the bookstore, half asleep after a long shift, when I saw him leaning against the wall across the street. He looked uncertain. I crossed toward him, slow. No words, just waiting. I read it, he said finally. The thing you posted. I nodded. I didn't know you were going through all that, he added. I was so caught up in what I thought it meant. About me, about my dad. You had every right to be upset, I said quietly. Yeah, he replied, but I didn't have the right to push you out like that. He looked at the ground. I'm sorry, Alex, for freezing you out, for making it about pride instead of people. I believed him. I'm not the same person anymore, I said. I can tell, he replied. You seem clearer. We didn't hug. We didn't pretend it hadn't happened. But we nodded at each other like two people who'd finally understood what growing up really meant. That night I opened Jack's message again. Still just one line, I wrote back. Still writing, still figuring it out. I didn't expect a reply, but an hour later he sent one. I hope you're proud of what you've become. I am. That was all. And somehow, that was enough. I kept writing, kept showing up to those little events, started mentoring a few kids who needed space to be messy, confused, and real. I never tried to rewrite what happened between me and Jack. It wasn't a love story. It wasn't supposed to last. But it mattered. Because for a few fragile days, someone saw a part of me I'd been hiding even from myself. And instead of backing away, he said, I see you. That moment gave me permission to say the same thing to others. Now when I look in the mirror, I see someone I trust. Someone who didn't run when things got hard. Someone who stayed honest, even when the truth cost more than silence. The last line of the piece I read that night said this: sometimes the people who change you the most aren't meant to stay. They're just meant to light the match. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with the fire.